Unconscious, Teach Me Hypnosis by Nobuyori Oshima. Forward. A hypnotist on stage with an actress said, "This sour lemon will taste sweet to you." And with that suggestion, she bit the lemon and said, "Whoa, it's sweet," to the cheers of the studio audience. A lot of people see stuff like this on daytime TV and they think, if I could do like that hypnotist does, that would be so cool. Actually, that was me. I was already working in psychological counseling at the time, and I wanted to learn this cool hypnosis. So I signed up for the workshop of the hypnosis master. This is what I call the hypnosis teacher, who is my amazing teacher. But I was really surprised when I got there, because what the hypnosis master was teaching was not this, you will be able to do this and that sort of suggestion that can work with one go. But it was a bunch of stuff like focus on the person's shoulder movements and align your breathing with theirs, or keep repeating questions that the person will answer yes to. I was thinking hypnosis was these crazy, drastic changes that you can just affect on people immediately. I had been hoping that if I mastered hypnosis, I would be able to control people and take away their pains and their worries with an immediate effect. But the hypnomaster's methods were pretty bland and conservative. But I kept practicing the master's hypno methods, even while protesting secretly in my heart that this was not what I was looking for. I would practice breathing alignment on random people on the train back home from the workshops. And when I did this, most of them would fall asleep. And I would think, so what if they fall asleep? What does that mean? Because I still could not recognize the power of hypnotherapy. Then one day, during my counseling work, this middle-aged businessman came to me who was having problems with his family, problems with his work, and nothing was going right, and he couldn't sleep at night. And so I tried the breathing alignment on him. And shortly after I started, the man fell asleep just like the people on the trains. But I couldn't be quite sure what kind of effect this was even having. The next week, this same man came into my office with a completely different expression on his face than the last time, like a completely different person, very light, bubbly. He took my hand suddenly and said, "Thank you so much," with these words of gratitude that during my entire career of psychological counseling, nobody had ever said to me, and I was really confused. With so much joy, this man said to me, "You made me remember that when I was young I had this dream of becoming a counselor, and now I've decided to quit my job and start studying to become a counselor." All I did to this guy was use the breathing alignment hypnosis technique. I thought I just made him fall asleep. So what the heck happened inside this guy's mind? I will explain this more thoroughly in the rest of the book, but what motivated and guided this man was the power of the unconscious. In the hypnotic state that is like to sleep, this troubled man's unconscious beautifully organized the warehouse of his memories so that he could remember his aspiration to become a counselor. The master's hypnosis is not to control or manipulate using suggestion, but simply put, it is to help the person freely use the power of their own unconscious. You can't underestimate the power of the unconscious because while consciousness is limited, there are no limits to the unconscious. Everyone who receives hypnosis of the master's methods eventually starts to use the power of their unconscious freely and without limitations. In a word, they become invincible. Once you start using the power of your unconscious through this hypnosis, then these wonderful developments will begin to happen in your real life that you would have never imagined possible for yourself before. Like, I don't feel nervous no matter who I'm talking to, or I can build these trustful relationships with people quite easily. I can exercise leadership, or all these ideas are just coming to my head. And this change is neither bland nor conservative. All of the hypnosis techniques that I present in this book are so simple and uninvolved that you will think, are you for real right now? Speaking of which, in the first book that I read from the hypnosis master, he wrote, "Please do not use these hypnosis techniques for evil." And I was like, is it even possible with such easy techniques that anyone can use to use this for evil? That's what I thought at the time, but right now I clearly see to a painful degree. Although these techniques are easy, they are so powerful that that warning was really necessary. And I believe that that warning is necessary for this book as well. These are easy techniques that anyone can do, but please do not use them for evil. Chapter 1. Let's become free from negative suggestions. Section 1. Anyone can easily do hypnosis. Well, I encountered hypnosis. When I was a student, I really couldn't study at all, and I was really pressed about increasing my concentration and memorization skills. I would buy these books with studying methods, trying to search for anything that works, and I even bought this very sus herb from the mall that's supposed to increase your memory, and I tried that. Then one day at the bookstore, I happened to find this cassette tape called Raise Your Concentration with Hypnosis, and I immediately bought it. And when I pressed play, there was this deep man's voice saying, "You're slowly walking down red carpet stairs, one step at a time, and you are slowly falling into feeling like a deep slumber." And eventually I did fall asleep. And from that point on, I listened to the tape every once in a while. And I didn't really get the feeling that I was better at concentrating on my studies. But when I listened to the tape, it made me sleep really well. So I was thinking, hypnosis is really cool. And that was my first experience with hypnosis. The first time I seriously considered studying hypnosis was when I first started working as a counselor. I'll explain more thoroughly in the rest of the book, but I decided to learn hypnotherapy techniques so that I could use them in my counseling. And I came across the hypnosis master's workshops, but it was nothing at all like what I expected with the red carpet stairs and whatnot. Section 2. A slightly odd hypnosis experience. This is a story about when I went to a nearby ramen shop with a few female colleagues from work. And one of them, I guess, heard rumor, and she asked me, "I heard recently you've been learning hypnosis." And I was like, oh, dang, this is going to be one of those, do hypnosis on me things. And I had a bad feeling about that, and I was right. So, right there in the ramen shop at the table, she was like, hey, do hypnosis on me right now. And probably with your run of the mill hypnosis, you would say, no, it has to be a quiet, kind of dim place, or else I can't do it. But the hypnosis that I learned is slightly odd, and it doesn't matter where you do it. I had zero confidence because I'd just learned it and I'd never faced someone trying to hypnotize them before. But I was like, yeah, of course I can do it. Because I wanted to impress the ladies, of course. So that they're like, oh my god, you can do it. Wow. And this is basically how the master's hypnosis goes. First, I ask the person, what's the color of the door to your apartment? And she says, it's gray. Continuing, I ask, when you open the door, are there shoes on the floor or are they in some sort of rack? And then she gives me all the details saying, well, I have a white shoe closet, but the door's closed and you can't see it. And there's 2 pairs of shoes that don't fit in there that are just on the concrete in the foyer. And one of the pairs of shoes is brown and white, and the other's tennis shoes, etc. And when you get in the foyer, there's gonna be a hallway with dark brown flooring about 1 to 1.5 meters wide. And after that's a glass door, and beyond the glass door, and when you open that, there's a carpet, and on the carpet there's a low wooden table about 1 meter in diameter, Japanese style. And she continued describing her house like this while the other women watched on, very interested, wondering what's going to happen after this. And as I was listening to this woman describe the layout and the look of her house in so much detail, I imagined it in my mind, and suddenly a story popped into my head. And like a mother trying to put her child to sleep, I told that story to the woman. And the story was about an animal trying to find its owner. And on its way trying to find its true owner, it gets into various troubles and problems that it has to overcome. And by the time I finished the story, the ramen had gotten lukewarm. And the woman's cheeks had streams of tears flowing down them. And the women around us started screeching, oh my god, you made her cry. And in this way I concluded my hypnotherapy. Section 3. Transforming into a strong adult woman. A little while after that, that woman who I made cry came up to me saying, thanks to you, I finally broke up with him. And I was like, what are you talking about? And she told me she had been living with this guy who did not work at all and was living off of her money, she says. What they call a dusty, perhaps. Of course, when I did the hypnosis, she didn't tell me anything about this. And even though all her friends told her, you need to break up with that loser already, she just couldn't do it. And actually, when I was listening to the layout and the look of her house, I thought, no, something's off here. And that was because there was this presence of a man hiding in there. And that woman, just by listening to my story about the animal trying to find its owner, suddenly made up her mind to leave that house, get rid of that problematic guy, and start living by herself. And she praised me, saying, I don't even think about men anymore. I would have never thought I could be like this. That hypnosis of yours is really something. Of course, before doing the hypnosis, she had never told me about any of her problems. I didn't even know that she was living with a guy. But using the unconscious, I was able to receive the troubles of this woman and create a story such that it solves her troubles. And it actually did solve her problems. And it was just at a table in a ramen shop in the middle of lunch. Such a loud, busy place. And I was able to put her in a hypnotic state and make it so that she can completely solve this relationship issue that, with all of her strength, she could not solve until now. In the amount of time that it takes for the ramen to just get a little bit lukewarm. And the way she changed after that was noticeable to everyone around her. At work, she used to be like a little girl asking help from all her colleagues all the time. And with each passing day, she was getting tougher. She was being more professional in her work, and she was changing into this strong adult woman. Section 4. With the healing power of the unconscious, you change yourself and the world. At the time, I was still thinking, no, there's no way I can just churn up stories like the hypnosis master. But that episode in the ramen shop was a breakthrough also for me. I was really surprised that it's true that anyone can really do this hypnosis quite easily. The hypnomaster teaches that it's not something that only special people can do. Anyone can easily use it. The hypnosis that I currently use is a little bit different from the hypnomasters. I made some adjustments over the years so that anyone can easily and enjoyably use the healing power of hypnotherapy. The unconscious power of hypnosis lives inside the mind of anyone who wants to use it. Anyone who thinks, I want to try to do hypnotherapy. Using this unconscious healing power, you can change the world around you, and you can change yourself. Chapter 2. Borrowing the power of the unconscious to become your true self. Is making someone cluck like a chicken really hypnosis? My impression of hypnosis before meeting the hypnomaster was just controlling people to do whatever you want through suggestions. I thought that hypnosis was putting someone in a slumber-like trance and making them follow exactly what your suggestions tell them to do. For example, like you see on the TV show, this hypnotist gets someone from the audience and tells them, you are now a chicken. And then they start prancing around, flapping their wings, going buck, buck, buck. Or telling a kid, you love to eat broccoli. And then they start chowing it down. I would see this kind of stuff on TV and think, man, I kind of wish I could do that. But the kind of hypnosis that the hypnomaster would later introduce to me took me completely off guard. I was just like, what the heck? Because it was nothing like what I had seen on TV up to that point. Now, you still put the person in a slumber-like trance. That's the same. But after that, you don't put in a suggestion that solves the person's issues. So if you have a woman who has trouble talking to men, you think, why can't you just put the thought, suggest the thought into her mind? You are no longer scared of men, or it's fun for you to talk to men. But you don't do this with the Master's hypnosis. Section 2. Our unconscious is helping us. The fundamental teaching of the Master's hypnosis is that our unconscious is helping us. That's all it is, but it's pretty vague, so I will present some cases that I personally witnessed. So there's this woman who really wants to get close to this guy, but every time she's around him, she gets super nervous. So how is the unconscious involved in this case? One could say that consciously this woman wants to get closer to this guy, but her unconscious is trying to help her to make her stay away from him and therefore making her nervous. When I heard this explanation from the Hypno Master, initially I thought, okay, what are you going to do with that? Are you able to fulfill her wish to get closer to this guy, or is that just an excuse not to? Very, very disrespectful things, I was thinking. However, after this woman received hypnotherapy, she realized, wow, I dodged a bullet by being nervous about this guy. Her nervousness was protecting her by putting the brake between her and this dangerous man. And this experience with hypnosis made this woman more relaxed in front of people, and it became more enjoyable for her to talk to people. And even her facial expression became rejuvenated and more cheerful. In this way, hypnosis helps people who are having problems to understand that their unconscious is helping them. Once they are able to notice their unconscious's help, they return back to their original self, and their life becomes more enjoyable and beautiful. After witnessing the Hypnomaster's hypnosis with my own eyes, I was a bit ashamed of myself because I had only taken up an interest in hypnosis because I wanted to manipulate people with these tricks of suggestions so that women would be like, oh, Oshima, you're so amazing, and look at me with reverence. Section 3. Unthinkable things can happen. To be honest, there were many moments that I felt divided about the master's hypnosis when I was starting to learn it, thinking, man, it really might be better if I could learn the show trick type hypnosis that they do on TV. But I was so taken away by the beauty of people who are struggling, using the power of the unconscious to return back to their original selves, that I missed my chance to study any other kind of hypnosis. The master's hypnosis is not one with a hierarchy where the practitioner is above the recipient and controls them through the hypnosis, but is a very modest type of hypnosis where you draw out the power of the unconscious that originally resides in the recipient in order to learn from it. After all, your breathing and your heart beating, which is vital to living, is controlled by your autonomic nervous system, which is also completely unconscious. As you breathe, your unconscious automatically regulates the frequency of breaths and the amount of oxygen you take in. And your heart is always beating unconsciously too, which is to say, our unconscious supports our very lives. And something also particular about the master's hypnosis is that it's not just done to the recipient, but the practitioner himself goes into a hypnotic state and is helped by the power of his own unconscious. Things happen in hypnosis that are unthinkable to the conscious mind. in which you can truly experience the amazing power of the unconscious. And you can see these beautiful outcomes that are so much higher than what you ever desired in your conscious mind. The only problem with this hypnosis is that the person doing it always feels like they never did anything, because you understand that it's not you, but the unconscious that is doing all the work. No matter how much people thank you for it, you really can't enjoy the fruits of your labor. But the more you use this hypnosis, the more you're charmed and bewitched by the workings of the unconscious. And it makes you think it may be bland, but it is incredible. Chapter 3. Everyone is under the influence of negative suggestions. Do you have a cold? This one phrase will actually make you sick. Even if I say that without you noticing it, you are being influenced by suggestions, I think that's kind of hard to conceptualize. Like, what is a suggestion? But has any of your friends or family said, "Hey, you sound kind of weird. Did you get a cold?" This is a suggestion. And even though you were totally normal up to the point that they said that, your body starts feeling heavy and you feel a bit feverish and you're wondering, wow, did I get a cold? Because you're actually having symptoms. And you go to the doctor and he says, yeah, your throat is inflamed. This is a cold. So you get actual symptoms of a cold, you can get a fever, and in this way, suggestions can cause an actual illness. And this is how I used to get so many colds that I would have to take a lot of cold medicine throughout the year. And it's really odd because as soon as all these people asking me if I got a cold weren't around me anymore, I stopped having them altogether. If at the moment you're wondering, do I have a cold? You recognize, oh wait, this is a suggestion. Then before you know it, your symptoms go away and you're just fine. In other words, when you're feeling bad like you have a cold, there is always actually a possibility that you're just under the influence of somebody's suggestion. In my case, the person casting this unpleasant suggestion on me was this very nice, older, middle-aged woman from work. She would look at me with this super serious, worried face and be like, "Oh, honey, you're looking kind of pale, aren't you?" And boom, the suggestion has been uploaded. And thanks to that, it wasn't just colds, but at one point I even had to be taken into emergency care. There was even one time right before having to do an interview, that woman came up to me saying, "Are you going to be okay? Because you always get nervous in times like this." And right at the beginning of the interview, my mind went completely blank and I could not really answer any of the questions, and I completely embarrassed myself. Of course, at the time I had no idea that this woman was casting suggestions on me. However, once I started taking the master's hypnosis, I realized that, wait, all of that was just suggestion. And I also realized that the reason I was so easily cast under the influence of this woman's suggestions was that she was overlapping with my mother. Section 2. Could suggestions also be the reason why your relationships aren't going well? When I was a little boy, my mother often told me, "You always get colds so easily." This was a negative suggestion from my mother, and for this reason, I did get colds a lot. And she gave me a lot of other negative suggestions. You can never focus on studying. You never finish what you start. You always give up too easily. You always say something extra and make people dislike you. She was always giving me these warnings or advices that I later realized were all just suggestions. Even after living on my own as an adult, I fully believed these things, like I mess up at work because I don't know how to concentrate. I don't do well with relationships because I always have to say something extra. And it really troubled me because no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't change. But this was all just the effect of my mother's negative suggestions. However, once I understood this mechanism, I was surprised at how well I could concentrate on important work, to the point that I even lost track of time because I was concentrating so hard. And even in relationships, I could see, this is the point where I would say something stupid and ruin the relationship, but I would stop myself. And so I could build up relationships and take care of them now. And I realized that I did have this relationship skill. It was shocking to realize that up to this point, I had been in a state of dark hypnosis under the effects of negative suggestions. And for so many years, I didn't realize this. This whole time I believed that I couldn't change myself because my bad characteristics were all just my personality or my lack of capability. Section 3. Beware of curses from your mother. I don't mean to scare you, but this is the same for everyone. Everyone, without realizing it, is under the influence of somebody's suggestions. They just don't realize that they are suggestions. For example, I always eat things that I shouldn't, or I'm not good at exercise, or I get angry easily. Most of the things that people consider to be their characteristics are actually just created by suggestion. The reason that the person thinks this is just my characteristic, this is how I am and I can't change it, is because of the effectiveness of the suggestions. One may never underestimate the power of suggestion. So, for example, listening to your mother give you various advices is probably more effective of a hypnosis than somebody's unskilled hypnosis. However, this worrisome mother's advices will be like a curse of suggestions. Of course, the mother herself is not thinking that she's trying to destroy her child through these suggestions. She's giving these warnings and advices with the wish to raise a decent human being. But all of these end up as negative suggestions that put her child in a hypnotic state, where they can no longer control themselves. So even people who think that they are immune to suggestion are already under the effect of a multitude of suggestions from their childhood, from their mother, and other adults. And without them realizing, these suggestions turn them into a version of themselves that makes it difficult to live in society. And you just don't realize it. Chapter 4. Unbind the suggestions and free yourself. Section 1. Why does my boss make me nervous? Right now, as I'm typing this sentence into my keyboard on my computer, I'm not thinking about which finger is pressing which key the whole time. I think everyone else is the same way, but my fingers memorize the places of the keys, and according to the sentence popping up in my head, unconsciously tap the keys. Started to consciously think, for example, I'm gonna hit the parentheses with my right pinky finger, and so on. I would have to start taking time to think of which keys, and I would start making more mistakes. If I started to consciously think, okay, with my right index finger, with my left middle finger, etc., I wouldn't really be able to type anymore. It's the same feeling that if you're unconsciously typing, then you can freely write any sentences you want. But if you try to consciously type, you can't do it anymore. This is suggestion. Suggestion forces you to consciously do things that you had been doing unconsciously. Some of you may be thinking, I don't have so many suggestions on me like that, but it is not easy to escape the effects of suggestion. For example, probably everyone has had the experience where in front of a boss or some important person, they get nervous and they can't say what they're thinking. Because of the nervousness, they say something completely unnecessary that they regret later. The more you are conscious of the person, the less you are able to speak normally, and this is because there's a suggestion in there. Because I have this suggestion inside of me that I get nervous in front of important people, every time I am in the presence of someone important, I can no longer speak naturally. And actually, the whole I can't speak well when I'm nervous thing in itself is a suggestion. Because why should it be that you can't speak well when you're nervous? This is also a suggestion that puts on the mask of common sense, and thereby changes us from our original selves to something different. So I think you understand by now that hypnosis is to dispel these suggestions and return one to their original freedom. And the state of having the suggestion of nervousness dissolved is your original self and your unconscious state. Section 2. Dispel suggestions and return to your original self. There are many methods to dispel suggestions, but for example, for the suggestion of getting nervous in front of important people, first you create the conditions for a suggestible state, and then you put in the suggestion that the person in front of you is your mother. This way, even if you're in front of someone important, you make the condition like it's a part of your family, and it dissolves the suggestion of nervousness. Now, some of you readers might be thinking, instead of going in such a roundabout way, why can't you just say a suggestion that cancels out the suggestion of nervousness by saying, you do not get nervous in front of important people? But this is like taking someone who says they have a hard time hitting the bracket key with their pinky finger on the keyboard. Putting in the suggestion, you can easily hit the bracket key with your pinky on the keyboard, which is to say it would make them even more conscious of the important person they're trying to talk to and make them even more nervous. When you're consciously doing something, suggestions automatically start going off. So it's important to put someone in a state where their consciousness is not working. When you put the suggestion on someone, oh, this person that you're nervous about is your mother, their conscious mind is like, what? In that moment, the cloud of suggestion clears away and the light of the unconscious can be seen shining through. The recipient of the suggestion that the person that they're nervous about is their mother will have this reaction of wanting to talk back, like, what are you talking about? Why would I be nervous in front of my mom? And in the first place, that's not the important person that I am nervous about. They naturally have this resistance. But while they're having this resistance, their consciousness is turned away from the suggestion that they are nervous in front of this important person. And so they naturally get into this unconscious state where they're like, well, I can just be myself in front of this important person. It's completely meaningless to tell someone who's under the suggestion that they can't throw things away, to put the suggestion in them that, no, you can throw things away. Same way as the suggestion of you are not nervous in front of important people, there's no point for the unconscious to make its appearance. Instead, try the suggestion, you throw everything away. And a big question mark pops over the person's head. it's a suggestion open to a lot of criticism. Like, what if I throw something important away? What if I need this thing that I throw away later? What am I going to do? It confuses the conscious mind and stuns it so that the unconscious steps in its place, which creates the condition where the person is like, wait a minute, I wasn't even thinking about this, and somehow I kept everything I needed and threw away everything I didn't. The hypnosis that I do is not about canceling out the suggestions put in by other people, but rather using suggestion to confuse the conscious mind so that your unconscious gets activated, thereby returning you to your original free self. And it's beautiful, this state where the conscious mind stops and the unconscious steps in. Chapter 5. You in the unconscious state is your true self. Section 1. Suggestions on people who are bad at conversation. When you're riding a bike and the tire is so narrow, but you don't have to be conscious of it, you can keep your balance without falling from the right to the left. This is the working of the unconscious. If you start thinking consciously, oh, I have to keep my balance on this thing, then it becomes a lot more difficult to ride a bike. Your unconscious automatically adjusts the handlebars to keep your balance matching with your speed from the left to the right. And your unconscious also automatically maintains your center of gravity in your body so that you can freely speed through even little tiny alleyways. If you consciously think, no, I have to drive in a straight line, then what you had been doing just naturally starts to get messed up and your handlebars start shaking out of control. It's such a fascinating phenomenon that if you leave it up to your unconscious, you can drive straight as much as you want. And the moment you start being conscious of this, you can't do it anymore. What's happening is the moment you're conscious of it, the suggestion starts coming into effect that you cannot drive straight. And so what you had been able to do unconsciously suddenly becomes impossible. But an even clearer example of the workings of the unconscious is conversations with other people. When you're having a fun, enjoyable conversation with someone, are the times that you are not conscious at all about, oh, I need to speak well. Your unconscious naturally reacts to the topics that the person brings up, and you give these natural reactions to it and continue the conversation. But if you start picking out things to say, the conscious thought that you have to make this a fun conversation, then suddenly there's an awkward silence and you're like, man, I am not good at talking. And the reason for this is that in the moment you are conscious of the conversation, the suggestion pops in that you are not a good conversationalist. In the past, I really struggled with not being able to carry a conversation because this conscious suggestion that I can't carry a conversation was super effective on me. In preparation for the conversation, I would have various simulations going on in my mind. But when I actually get to the point of talking to them, if the conversation deviates from this simulation at all, I immediately am conscious of the conversation and I go back to my usual stuttering, pathetic self. However, since becoming able to use hypnosis, thanks to the unconscious, I will just be quiet and the other person will continue the conversation for me. My unconscious will come up with responses to the person's conversation for me so that I don't have to think about anything and just be enjoying a fun conversation. And some of you might be thinking, is it really okay to just leave it up to your unconscious without consciously trying to control the conversation? And I used to have the same worry, but the fact is, conversations that your unconscious just continues for you are the most fun conversations of all, which you never have any regrets about. On the other hand, when you are consciously trying to conversate, those are the times where immediately afterwards you're like, man, I should not have said that. And after you go home, you spend all this time reflecting on what you said wrong, and you can't even sleep. Leaving that to your unconscious, you can avoid all of that and sleep like a baby. Section 2. Everything the unconscious does is beautiful. When I was little, my parents would always get mad at me, saying, you depend on people too much, and you ask people for too much. And since I had this suggestion in me, even after becoming an adult, I was always thinking, I have to decide things on my own and execute them and take responsibility like an adult. But even though I wanted to make decisions on my own the right way, there was also this other common sense type of suggestion sliding in there, telling me it doesn't matter what I decide to do because I'm such a screw up, there's no way it'll turn out well. And so in my life, nothing I attempted turned out well, in fact. But I was good at one thing, which is taking responsibility for my failures, because all I was doing was failing, so I was quite used to taking this responsibility naturally. And such a person that I had a lot of resistance to the concept of not thinking by myself, but in a hypnotic state, giving it up to my unconscious. I was very serious about my duty to consciously and deliberately do things and take responsibility for the results of those things. And I was also raised in a very strict Christian household, so I had this feeling that manipulating people's minds with hypnosis is just something you can't do. Once I was actually able to leave things up to my unconscious in a hypnotized state, I started to see that people who are successful in everything they're doing are doing it in a hypnotized state. People who are successful in life and enjoying their interpersonal relationships are leading this charmed life because they are skillfully using the hypnotic state, which is free from the suggestions of the conscious. So I thought, wow, it's such a waste if you don't use hypnosis then. And even though I was so against depending on people and asking them to do stuff for me, I was totally ready to let go of my conscious and lead a life of dependence on my unconscious. And when you use hypnosis to leave yourself to the care of the unconscious, things will just keep happening that would have been unthinkable in the world of the conscious mind that you had been living up to that point. You'll be really touched inside at the beauty of the unconscious. It's true, everything the unconscious does stands to reason and has beauty. Chapter 6. Meeting the Hypnomaster. Section 1. I want to help people who are struggling to relax. To finish off this first part of the book, I would like to explain in more detail my first meeting with the hypnosis master. After studying psychology in America and returning to Japan, I was working in psychological counseling. And at the time, I believed that just by listening to people's problems, I could help them solve them. That's the method that they drilled into us in university, and it was really ingrained in me that all you have to do is listen to the person, and it will lighten their burden and make them regain their freedom. And when we played out these big scenarios in school, the person playing the role of the client would always say, I feel so relieved after being listened to. And so you feel the same way too. But when I actually started counseling, I was like, what? This is not what we rehearsed in school. Because it just didn't turn out that way. Even though I was seriously and dedicatedly listening to these clients who were suffering from various problems, it was like their mind was impervious to it, and their symptoms did not change at all, and they were not relieved. After implementing everything I learned in university, I discovered that real life is not so easy. When I asked my psychiatry teacher, what can I do to help relieve these clients of their suffering? He said, what, do you want them to be thankful? And laughed at me. No, I wasn't after people's gratitude. I just want to relieve people of their suffering and pain. I want to find the method of how to do this, that's all. And I was really distressed because I couldn't find the way to do that. And it was like the same situation I was in school when I wasn't able to study and I was trying all these different things so that I would be able to concentrate. Section 2. Shocked by the workshop of the hypnomaster. At that point, I again thought, I should study hypnosis. So I threw away all my pride and my shame, and I stood in the corner of the bookshop with the psychology books trying to find stuff related to hypnosis. And I found this book called Introduction to Modern Hypnosis, and I immediately bought it and devoured it. Inside that book, there was a flyer for a course on modern hypnotherapy. At the time, I didn't like being around a bunch of people, so I would hate to go to classes where I'd have to be around a bunch of people. There were a lot of classes that I was super interested in, but I didn't sign up for because of this. I just really had a hard time being around a bunch of people, and there was nothing I could do about it. But the strange thing was, just for this hypnotherapy class, I didn't hesitate to call them up and get registered. And I was so surprised at my ability to do this that I was even wondering, wait, was there some sort of hypnotic trick in the book making me do this? I thought that when I got there, it was going to be a bunch of hypnotherapy specialists polishing up their skills. But I was really surprised when I got there. There was not a single person like that, and it was all a bunch of amateurs. And even the teacher of the workshop was just looking like some old guy in a business suit. And this was my first encounter with the hypnosis master. And my apologies to them, but when I looked over the room at the participants and the hypnosis master, I immediately thought, oh man, I made a mistake coming here. I didn't show it, but I was thoroughly disappointed because I had really big expectations. And whenever I have high expectations, I always fail. And when everyone went around doing their introductions, my eyes kind of glazed over like, man, seriously, not a single one of you is a specialist. But I maintained my customer service smile. And when it was my turn to give an introduction, suddenly the hypnomaster said, looks may be deceiving, but Mr. Oshima is actually a hard-working man with 5 kids to feed. And at first I was confused, but then for some reason I just followed his lead in my introduction and said, yeah, it's pretty hard to make ends meet, but I'd like to take this opportunity to learn hypnotherapy and use it in my counseling work. Section 3. Breaking the gray wall of the conscious. Of course, I am not a hard-working man with 5 kids. So why did the hypnomaster do this fake introduction? I only understood this later, but the hypnomaster's little surprise attack here destroyed the judgment of my conscious mind and pulled me into a hypnotic state of the unconscious. But at that point in time, I couldn't even imagine the power of the unconscious. The Hypnomaster's workshop was over 12 classes, and throughout these, I went to him several times saying, I don't think I'm right for this and I should probably quit. That's how strong the conscious suggestions were on me. There was this tall gray wall of the conscious in front of me saying, I'm not gonna get anything out of this, doing this with a bunch of people who aren't even working in psychology. Or there's no point learning this stuff that has no scientific basis. In one of the first classes, the hypnomaster hypnotized me. I heard him saying, Can't you see? Look, Oshima, you can see. And I said, No, sir, I can't see anything. And he said in a sweet low voice, No, I know you can see it. I can't see anything, and I can't hear anything. I can't see anything with my mind's eye, and I can't hear the voice of my heart. I believe this very strongly with no doubt. But then I could see a beam of light before my eyes. I had just been closing my eyes with the stubborn belief that I'm not someone who can be hypnotized. And I answered, I can see all the light. And I was called into the beautiful world of the unconscious. Part 2. The truth about the unconscious, the main character of hypnosis. Chapter 1. The hypnosis of the genius Dr. Erickson. Section 1. Being a child prodigy. When you talk about hypnosis, one cannot fail to mention the American psychiatrist and psychologist Dr. Milton Erickson, who was born in 1901 and died in 1980. He was a huge influence on me, and it's really nostalgic for me to look back at when I was in school and read Dr. Erickson's book, and I thought, hypnosis is amazing. There is one very interesting anecdote from Dr. Erickson's childhood showing his genius. When he was a little boy, he was watching a bunch of adults struggling to get a cow into the back of a truck, and he said, I could do that easily. And the adults were laughing at him like, we've got all these strong men trying to pull this cow in here, and you're just a weak little boy. But little boy Erickson went behind that cow and pulled her tail in the opposite direction of the cargo of the truck. And the cow was like, no, you're not gonna pull me back, and walked forward. And little Erickson let go of the cow's tail, and she walked right up into the back of the truck. So Erickson saw this cow who didn't want to move forward, and he told her, okay, then you must go backward, pulling her in the opposite direction so that she does go forward. This is a treatment method called a paradox, and shockingly, Erickson had mastered this from the age of a child. For example, Dr. Erickson took this person who was afraid of fainting from panic attacks, said, let's go to dinner at the restaurant together, and walked with her there. On the way there, when she was like, oh no, I'm gonna have a panic attack, Dr. Erickson said, oh, you can faint right here. There's grass and it'll be a cushion for you. And then suddenly this person was like, wait, I'm not gonna faint. You can faint here is the opposite message of, oh no, I can't faint here, that the person had been thinking. In reaction to this, the person's unconscious was activated and she was able to feel the power of not fainting, and therefore she did not faint. Section 3. A treatment abundant in forgiveness and kindness. If you know a bit about psychology, you probably thinking, wait, isn't this the reverse psychology that parents use on their children? For example, parents will tell kids who, no matter how much they're trying to get them to study, won't listen to them. They'll say the opposite. It's okay, you don't have to study anymore. Actually, let's just throw away the textbooks. Then the kid reluctantly goes to his desk and starts studying. This sort of reverse psychology does seem quite similar to Dr. Erickson's paradox at first glance, but is actually quite evidently not the same. Even though the parents are saying, it's fine, you don't have to study anymore, if that child actually didn't study, soon enough the parents would start yelling at him, why aren't you studying? Children are supposed to be studying. And they would start putting even more controls on the child's behavior. So hidden behind these words of, oh, it's fine, you don't have to study, is this hidden punishment of this threat of children who don't study will be rejected, ostracized by society, and abandoned by their own parents. But behind Dr. Erickson's remark, it's okay to faint here, is this forgiveness, this allowance of, even if you faint here, I won't look down on you and I won't abandon you. If that person had actually fainted even after he said it's okay to faint here, Dr. Erickson probably would have just said, look up at the sky. You can already see the first star of the evening. There is no punishment hidden behind Dr. Erickson's paradox. For example, like, why are you fainting now that I'm giving you treatment? Or, if you're gonna faint here, then I don't even want to treat you anymore. Dr. Erickson tries to predict how the person will react when he uses his paradox and continuously verifies the effect. And he takes special care to notice the unique reactions of the person and uses these unique reactions as the power of the unconscious. No matter what kind of reaction the person gives, Dr. Erickson allows it, he verifies it, and then he utilizes it. And by doing so, he puts the person into a hypnotized state. For example, if a psychiatric patient was declaring himself to be Jesus Christ, Dr. Erickson would not try to admonish that person saying, hey, if you go around saying that, you're going to freak people out. Dr. Erickson instead would say, well, Jesus was the son of a carpenter, and try to get this patient interested in carpentry. And once that patient's unconscious takes it from there, Erickson will try to find the entry point for treatment. In Dr. Erickson's therapy, by allowing and forgiving any sort of symptoms, you're able to test out the unconscious power working in that person. And I believe this kindness is the foundation that makes up his therapy. Section 2. Your unconscious forgives you and accepts you. As someone deeply impressed by Dr. Erickson's hypnotherapy, I immediately tried to incorporate it into my counseling work. But no matter how hard I tried, I wasn't able to forgive any symptoms of my clients and utilize them. There was no forgiveness inside me, but just the judgment of, no, that symptom is wrong, or that behavior is weird. So then I thought, I don't think I'm able to do Dr. Erickson's hypnosis on people. But after that, I started going to the Hypnomasters workshop classes, and I had the experience of encountering the unconscious through hypnosis. I discovered that this is the mechanism behind Dr. Erickson's hypnosis. When hypnosis puts you in the unconscious state, you stop judging the other person. first time I really grasped this feeling where you can use any symptom as a tool to pull someone into hypnosis like Dr. Erickson did was when I encountered the unconscious. It was my conscious mind telling me to think of this and that and desperately try to imitate Dr. Erickson. But the conscious has its limits. When you allow and forgive any symptoms of the client and just observe objectively and verify their reactions to your words, the way that Dr. Erickson did, the unconscious naturally starts working. Once I understood this, I really started to enjoy trying to induce people into a hypnotic state with Erickson's methods. The conscious is limited, but the unconscious has no limits. And the unconscious does not only forgive and allow the other person, it also forgives and allows me and helps me. This is the power of the unconscious that Dr. Erickson had been using. Chapter 2. Your unconscious has no limits. Section 1. What is open dialogue? In the Care Buddhist Hospital in Finland, they use a technique called open dialogue as a therapeutic intervention for schizophrenia. It's a very simple technique where a team of therapists just visit the patient's house every day and have a conversation. And this relates to Dr. Erickson's paradox, because the patient and his family are listening as this team of therapists is having a conversation like, why is this guy having these type of symptoms? They're discussing this among themselves. And as they sit here discussing this, suddenly the patient himself butts in to say, no, you got it wrong. This is why I'm doing this. And after the patient's little explanation, the team of therapists goes back to discussing, well, this is what he says, but I wonder what's really going on here. And as they do this again, the patient comes out interrupting, saying, no, you've got it wrong, and goes a bit deeper in opening up about what's really going on with him. And in this way gradually develops a deeper understanding between the therapist and the patient. The sense of loneliness, of being misunderstood, which is at the root of the symptoms, is resolved and the symptoms themselves improve. The thing that makes this open dialogue similar to Dr. Erickson's paradox method is that the therapists are talking about you, the patient, without you having a say in it. The patient is closing himself off because he thinks nobody understands my feelings. And then in comes this group of people who don't understand his feelings, talking about his feelings. And so the patient who was closed off, thinking, no, I'm not going to talk about myself, suddenly gets the urge to explain himself and thereby correct these people on their mistakes. This is the power of the unconscious drawn out by the paradox. The therapist, talking about the patient as if he isn't right there in front of him, uses paradox to draw out the unconscious power of the patient, who is thereby released from his symptoms and starts living more freely. Being freed from his loneliness through this open dialogue, over time the patient will be able to use the power of his unconscious more, and his true original self will return. Section 2. Could the root issue be a so-called spasm of loneliness? When I was a child, I would have these internal spasms of loneliness, thinking that nobody would understand me, which would put me in such a hypnotic state that I could not control myself. My mind would go blank. I wouldn't be able to speak what I was thinking. My body would get rigid and I couldn't move it the way that I wanted. Dr. Erickson's hypnotherapy, which uses the unconscious, frees us from this hypnotic state caused by spasms of loneliness, which are normally weak electric currents running through your brain suddenly have a strong pulse of electricity. The conscious is limited, but the unconscious has no limits. Therefore, no matter what symptoms I have, no matter what me I am at the moment, the unconscious never chastises me, never tells me I'm wrong, but just allows and accepts me. No matter who you are, if your spasms of loneliness are quelled through the power of the unconscious, and your issues and symptoms improve, then you will be able to use the power of your unconscious. Be freed from all kinds of different restraints and become able to do things that you wouldn't have even thought of before. But why is it that there are limitations on the conscious and the unconscious is limitless? This is actually quite simple. The range of what you can consciously think about is limited, isn't it? Well, everything outside of that is the unconscious, so therefore there is no limit to the unconscious. If you are consciously feeling lonely, your unconscious is feeling everything outside of that. So the loneliness is quelled and you are freed from this torture and despair and these destructive impulses. Open dialogue requires a handful of therapists, but Dr. Erickson's hypnosis uses the unconscious, so it's like having 1,000, 10,000, or 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 therapists. And all of these 1,000,000,000 therapists accept you and forgive you, which heals you from this deep loneliness of being misunderstood, so that you can live your life freely. Chapter 3. Spasms of loneliness are deceiving and misleading you. Section 1. The hypnosis scene in the film Psycho. When I was taking the hypnosis master's course, he showed us one scene from the Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho as an easy-to-understand example of the hypnotic state. It starts with a man and a woman having a secret tryst in a hotel. The man is telling the woman that he can't marry her because he doesn't have any money. And the woman then asks him, "So if you had money, you could marry me?" And the man says, "Even if I had money, I couldn't marry you." And he leaves the room. When the woman goes back to work, her boss gives her a briefcase full of cash and tells her that she needs to put it in the safe in the bank. But instead of driving to the bank, the woman drives off with the suitcase full of cash, and eventually she pulls over at the side of the road to take a nap, only to be awoken by a police officer tapping her window. And I remember when I saw this scene, I got a little bit excited, thinking, oh, this is what hypnosis is. The woman's loneliness was triggered in her conversation with that man, which led to a spasm, which then caused her to transform into a self-destructive version of herself, someone who would steal a briefcase full of cash. So this woman was in some form of hypnotic state in a trance. The hypnosis that we use is to cancel out these spasms of loneliness one after the other, which results in a calmed brain that activates the power of the unconscious. For example, if we take the woman from the film Psycho, who was put in a hypnotic trance through the actions and words of her boyfriend, if she were freed from these spasms of loneliness through the power of the unconscious, she would start to think, wait, why am I limiting myself to this one guy? In the hypnotic state triggered by spasms of loneliness, she couldn't see anything other than her desire to be with this one man. But once these spasms dissipate, she is able to see that she has unlimited possibilities and therefore is able to choose something that's fun for her, something enjoyable. And so she returns to her original, beautiful self. The state of not being your original self is when your mind and body are in disarray through the spasms of loneliness, filling you with anger and hatred, fixation, doubt, suspicion, anxiety, fear. But when these spasms of loneliness are quelled, you're freed from all of that, so you return to your beautiful natural state. Section 2. The world of the unconscious is nothing but fun stuff. People say when you're arguing with someone, for example, you unconsciously say something horrible to hurt their feelings. This is actually not an unconscious state, but rather a state of hypnosis triggered by the spasm of loneliness. This spasm is triggered by the feeling that you're not being understood, which makes you shift into this destructive personality, which is why you get into an argument. The same thing goes for when you, quote, unconsciously can't stop thinking about negative things when you're at work, or you, quote, unconsciously find someone you hate living rent-free in your brain. This is not actually an unconscious state. This is a state of spasms of loneliness. After all, when you're in the hypnotic state, which utilizes the power of the unconscious, these spasms of loneliness are canceled out, so your attention never moves towards negative things or people. All you'll be thinking about are fun things and fun people popping into your head. Since the world of the unconscious is a world of limitless options, there's no need for you to go out of your way to choose unpleasant people or things to think about. And the modern hypnotherapy that I use lures you into this world of the unconscious where there are limitless possibilities in front of you. And if I hype it up like this, many of you are probably thinking that the hypnosis that uses the power of the unconscious seems too difficult, something that you can't do. But actually, this feeling that it seems difficult or something that you can't do are just the spasms of loneliness talking. Underneath our conscious mind, our unconscious is always working and helping us. Just the thought alone of using the power of the unconscious to do hypnotherapy is enough to make your unconscious lead you into the world of limitless possibilities. Chapter 4. The Mystery of Mirror Neurons. Section 1. Mirror neurons imitate other people's brains. These neurons in the brain called mirror neurons are actually what makes this hypnotherapy that uses the unconscious something that anyone can easily do. Mirror neurons are widely known as sympathetic or imitating neurons, and they are responsible, for example, for the phenomenon where sitting next to someone who is nervous makes you nervous too. Mirror neurons have the characteristic of whoever you shift your focus towards, you start imitating the state of their brain. And it'll get a little complicated here, but when you are imitating someone else's brain through these mirror neurons, that person is also imitating your brain through their mirror neurons. This characteristic of mirror neurons is put to use in the hypnomaster's technique of breathing alignment or tuning, which is when you imitate someone else's breathing in order to induce them into a hypnotic state. This method of breathing alignment, which I would like to have all the readers master through this book, depends on a similar mechanism to noise canceling systems. Noise-canceling systems are this wonderful technology used where the noise from the highway is very loud, which produces the opposite sound waves from the noise of the cars and plays them through speakers so that the car noise is canceled. This is the same technology used in noise-canceling headphones, which you can use in the middle of the city or on an airplane or wherever to cancel out the noise from the outside. The hypnosis using breathing alignment works with the same mechanism. You can say the anxiety in someone's brain is noise. And just like the noise-canceling systems produce the reversed sound waves, when your brain mimics the nervousness of someone else's and then their brain mimics yours, this mirroring causes the nervousness to be canceled out so that the other person goes into an unconscious state where they're like, wow, I'm not nervous anymore. And what I want you to remember here is that the unconscious is a state where this noise of fear, anxiety, and anger don't exist. Section 2, you can also freely access someone's knowledge through hypnosis. When I was practicing breathing alignment on the train and aligning my breathing with the people in front of me, sometimes I would feel burden and difficulty breathing. And I continued with the breathing alignment to the point that the person seems to have fallen asleep. At that moment, the constriction in my throat would go away. So I could really feel firsthand that the nervousness of that person was being transferred to me through mirror neurons, which is what was making my throat feel constricted. And sometimes when I was doing this breathing alignment, suddenly my mind would become flooded with these flashbacks of all frustrating, outrageous things that happened during work. But the second the other person fell asleep, I would notice that this frustration was completely gone. The anger that was being communicated to me through mirror neurons from the other person's brain had disappeared. In fact, this state of being captive to anger, hatred, resentment, fear, and anxiety is a state where your brain is having electrical spasms. And these spasms are dissipated when you use the breathing alignment to cancel out and return to an unconscious state. So the anger and hatred also disappear. But an even more fascinating thing happens when you're doing breathing alignment and the person goes into a hypnotic state. In that moment, you can see the inside of that person's house. This would happen sometimes, and afterwards, the person would show me pictures of the inside of their house, and it was exactly how I had pictured it when I was doing the breathing alignment. Which means that through mirror neurons, we can also imitate the knowledge of someone else. When you cancel out the noise through breathing alignment, enter an unconscious hypnotized state where the noise of fear and anger are neutralized. You can also imitate the knowledge inside the other person's brain and use it to your liking. But not only that, even more interestingly, the person who is being hypnotized will say that they can see things that they didn't see before and understand things that they didn't understand before. Sometimes the person who was hypnotized will suddenly come up with knowledge of things that they never studied before and never knew about. Section 3, Mirror Neurons and the Internet. The distance between you and the other person doesn't matter when you're imitating their brain through mirror neurons. One can say that you can imitate anyone's brain no matter where they are or who they are. and you can use that person's knowledge and wisdom. If it were in the past, this would seem completely ridiculous to most people. Nowadays, we have the internet as a really good example to visualize this. All of the computers and phones all over the world can connect to each other through the internet without being physically connected through a phone wire or cord. We're in an age where someone in Japan can easily access the most cutting-edge psychological research papers from America, gain knowledge from them. Mirror neurons work in the same way as the internet. If you use hypnosis to clear out the noise from your brain and enter into an unconscious state, you can connect to a vast network of other people's brains through mirror neurons. So you can get any sort of information you want in the world, making your life more convenient and fun. In passing, the speed at which these mirror neurons imitate the other person's brain has yet to be discovered, but I wonder if this could be even faster than the speed of light, which is considered the fastest speed in our current science. The unconscious transcends the constraints of time and space. To connect to anyone else's brain, to use their knowledge and wisdom. And the more you think about this, the more fun hypnosis gets. Chapter 5, Effects of Hypnosis. Effect 1, Becoming someone who doesn't think about anything. Section 1, The Happiness of Being Empty-Headed. So at the end of this part of the book, I want to give some examples of what good things can happen as an effect of hypnosis. And there were so many of them that it's hard to choose. Up to now, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of brilliant people in a lot of different workplaces, but I've always had this nervousness around everyone, like I can't just relax and let go. I always had this anxious feeling like if I let my guard down just a little bit, that the other person would use me and destroy me. And so I was always battling with everyone inside of my mind. So I couldn't trust anyone, and I was always pretending in front of people, and no matter where I went, I couldn't just relax. I was always imagining all the unfortunate things that could happen to me and getting nervous because of them and preparing myself for them. And because I was like that, people at work would pretty much keep me at arm's length. And I accepted it like this is just the way it's gonna be. It's just normal for me to be disliked. But the impression I got of the hypnosis master was different. When I first met him, I felt this strange feeling that I had never experienced before, where I was like, I don't feel like competing with this guy. Up to that point, whenever I met someone who's like higher level, it's like the better they are, the more I feel this competitive spirit that I have to absorb everything I can from them and surpass them. But I didn't get this feeling from the hypnosis master, and it was actually the first time that I thought it's just fun being around this person. And then after I started practicing the breathing alignment hypnosis method on the train to and from work every day, I learned from the hypnomaster. I started to notice that the nervousness and the negative feelings I had been experiencing were from these electrical spasms happening in other people's brains and did not come from me. And around that time, the hypnomaster invited me on a trip with him in summer to the Japanese cities of Nara and Kyoto. And when we were visiting one temple in Nara, and we went to cool ourselves down from the heat on the greenery around the main temple building, and I found myself shocked that I had not been thinking about anything. Normally, I'm always focused on other people, trying to not cause issues with them, getting carried away with my anxiety and anger and panic, and I just have no chill. This consciousness was completely gone from me. For about 2 hours, me and the hypnomaster were just sitting there, chilling out, not even talking. And then the hypnomaster said, "So you can just chill too, huh, Oshima?" And I was so glad I even started tearing up. And I didn't say this, but in my heart I was so grateful to him, thinking, yes, I can finally just chill thanks to the hypnosis that you taught me. I just never thought the day would come that I could just enjoy my time, spacing out without worrying about other people. My head had always been clogged with fears of the future, regrets of the past, and by neutralizing these through the hypnosis again and again, and getting into an unconscious state, before I knew it, the inside of my mind was just calmness. And at that moment, I was truly grateful that I had gotten into hypnosis. Section 2, Saving Other People and Saving Yourself. When you neutralize the spasms of other people, your own spasms are automatically neutralized. When the spasms from yourself and the other person are neutralized, then your brain gets calm and you connect to the unconscious. While we are in this state, we start using the unlimited knowledge of the unconscious so that it becomes unnecessary to think with your own mind. You just start having fun and letting your unconscious take care of everything. I realized that this is the world how the hypnomaster sees it. I was able to see a glimpse of this new reality that I had never imagined before. And then the more I used the hypnosis, the more I wanted to break myself free. Later on, I met one person who seemed to be living so freely and to have such an attractive life. And my impression of that person was quite similar to when I first met the hypnosis master. From the moment they shook my hand, there was this strange sense of unity, and there was no feeling of hierarchy between me and them. And I wondered, could it be that this person also uses the unconscious hypnosis methods? And afterwards I found out it was true. This person had suffered trauma in the past, and as they used this unconscious hypnosis on a bunch of other people, their own emotional scars became neutralized and they were able to connect to their unconscious. In the past, I would have doubted such a story, but when they told me this, I didn't have that feeling at all. I believed them because the same thing happened to me, and it was a very calm feeling. As you use hypnosis on other people, you yourself will be relieved of your emotional scars and suffering and become more and more liberated. Chapter 6, The Effects of Hypnosis 2. You can build up relationships with ease. Section 1, New Employees Transformed in Just 3 Days of Training. In a lot of my books, I write about the first time I met the hypnosis master at one of his workshops, and he gave me the impression that he was just some older guy. But he really did seem like just some dude. I was even thrown off by it, worried, like, is it okay to be learning hypnosis from this guy who just looks like any old guy in a business suit? But after that first impression, over and over, he kept proving to me how amazing he was. And even now, I think the world needs to know that such an amazing teacher exists. And I expressed this to him directly one time, saying, the world needs to know about you. And he just laughed it off like, yeah, true. One thing that left a very deep impression on me was when this company hired him to do the training for their new employees. It was just a 3-day training, but all of them became his biggest fans and were saying he's so amazing just in that short amount of time. Through his hypnosis, he won all of their hearts. And what was even more surprising was 10 years later, all of the new employees that went through the Hypnomaster's training became indispensable assets to that company. The Hypnomaster used his hypnotherapy to draw out the maximum potential and the maximum charm of these people and transform them into the most important assets in that company. And you're probably thinking, this is an exaggeration. He couldn't have transformed all of these new employees. But I can tell you honestly from the heart because I saw the way they were before the hypnosis and I saw how they were after, and they truly had changed. And I can see evidence of this in the way that they're working at the company now. And it just has a whiff of the Hypnomaster's hypnosis. The Hypnomaster could use the power of hypnosis to just in 3 days of interaction with these people change the entire future of them and the company itself. Section 2. Becoming my true self, becoming just a person. In the past, I had a real knack for whatever I'm doing, failing, people disliking me, suspecting me, and just being against me. I tried so hard for people to trust me, and not only did they not trust me, they made fun of me, and I was walking on eggshells for people to just like me, but they were disgusted by me. They just didn't like me. And whatever type of plan I came up with, racking my brain, no matter how wonderful of an opinion I had, just because those ideas came from me, they were treated as worthless. I was just always wondering, why me? And over time I got used to it and I told myself, be a man, this is what a man has to deal with. But deep in my heart, it really hurt my feelings. And being such a good for nothing, even after I came into contact with the Hypnomaster's hypnosis, I put it away saying, I'm not using this. Because I got the feeling that if I did use the Hypnomaster's hypnosis, I would be able to easily, without difficulty, build up relationships with people. And instead of it being like a reward for all of my previous suffering and effort, it would be like the Hypnomaster's hypnosis would make all of that effort meaningless. That's the feeling I got, so that's why I decided to keep fighting in the same way I'd always been. And at one point, it led to so much interpersonal struggle that I just wanted to scream out, like, I'm done. And that's when I finally decided to use the Hypnomaster's hypnosis. And then when I entered the unconscious state through the hypnosis, suddenly I was like, what? Wait a minute, I don't even care about these relationships. And it was really surprising. And I was able to let go of my fixation on improving these relationships that I had been working on so hard. And what I mean by letting go of the relationships or not caring about them is not to say that I don't respect people anymore, but that the unconscious is working in the hypnotized state so that I can recognize a different way of respecting people than what I had previously been doing. If you would call my relationships up to that point as serious, then in the unconscious hypnotized state, these relationships would be laid back. But inside of here is a feeling of trust and confidence. I could never reach this relationship of trust when I seriously made efforts to respect other people, but it just came naturally to me in the unconscious state. And these trustful relationships grew and widened into such a wonderful picture that I would only dream of. When you use the power of the unconscious through hypnosis, your unconscious sets your relationships with people in order without you having to make any efforts. All you have to do is let your unconscious take care of it, and you can just space out, not giving a care, letting it go. And this is how you can always be your true self. And I realized that this first impression I had of the Hypnomaster, of him just being any old dude, was actually due to him being in this state. And at some point, I reached the point of no return where I could never be separated from this hypnosis.